Have you ever felt a shiver run through your spine? A sensation that something in your world, everything you thought was solid, is in fact trembling, almost imperceptibly yet undeniably? It begins quietly, a subtle dissonance, a whisper beneath the roar of ordinary life, a sense that the walls around you, the structures of time and expectation, are thinner than you ever imagined. Most people never hear this whisper. They are too busy, too distracted, too committed to the roles they've inherited, the stories they tell themselves. But once you hear it, once that call reaches your consciousness, something shifts. The ordinary becomes intolerably narrow, and you start to perceive the world differently, almost as if you've been living inside a painted theater set your entire life. And the moment you notice the brush strokes, the illusion begins to unravel. And when it unravels, when reality begins to bleed through the cracks of your everyday understanding, you feel it. The first pang of isolation, the loneliness that is not merely a lack of human company, but a fissure in the soul, a recognition that you are no longer aligned with the mundane heartbeat of the masses. This is not a symptom of failure, nor a mark of inadequacy. It is the unmistakable signature of awakening. For the spiritually conscious, the intellectually unafraid, the seekers who dared to ask questions others would never dare whisper aloud. Loneliness is not a curse, it is a doorway. And the doorway is wide, terrifying in its openness, exposing the raw vulnerability of being truly alive. You see, the world most people inhabit is a consensus trance, a collective agreement rarely examined, that life has a certain shape, that reality has been carefully packaged and labeled, and that the individual self, this fragile ego, is the ultimate measure of all things. Here, meaning is prescribed, success is calculated, and fear is the currency. In this trance, people are comfortable. They are predictable. They are synchronized with a rhythm of existence that feels safe precisely because it is confined. Their lives are neatly folded origami, compressed into roles: teacher, doctor, banker, parent, child, consumer. Each label fits like a key in a lock, each expectation comfortably locked into place. Awakening is an act of rebellion against this cosmic architecture. And rebellion, by its very nature, is lonely. When you awaken, the rules no longer apply. Suddenly the labels feel absurd, the categories arbitrary. You see that success is not accumulation, but an ephemeral mirage. You see that approval is not validation, but a momentary reflection of someone else's projection. You see that life, as most understand it, is a series of clever illusions, a performance repeated so often that it has convinced even its own actors of its gravity. And when you see this, the isolation begins. For how do you speak the language of a world you no longer believe in? How do you explain, without ridicule or misunderstanding, that the essence of your being is not confined to the skin you inhabit, that your consciousness is not a personal possession, but a stream of the universe experiencing itself through this fragile, temporary vessel? You learn, often painfully, to translate. You craft metaphors, deploy humor, feign compliance. You become bilingual in reality, speaking both the tongue of the unawakened and the language of the infinite. But the constant translation is exhausting. It is a tightrope over an abyss of misunderstanding, a performance with no audience that truly understands. And yet, the deeper loneliness lies not in misunderstanding, nor in the need for translation, but in recognition. Recognition that you are not separate, that the boundaries you once assumed between you and the universe, between self and other, between life and death, were illusions. You are not observing the universe is observing itself through you. You are not a wave on the ocean. You are the ocean pretending to be a wave. You are not a single candle in the dark. You are the entire flame of existence flickering in 1,000 forms, momentary yet eternal. And when you realize this, there is a paradoxical pain. For almost everyone around you, this is invisible. They cling to the notion of separateness with ferocious certainty. They build walls, armor, identities to protect themselves from the truth that they too are the infinite. Yet they will not allow themselves to see. And now, you, raw, cracked open, unarmored, cannot ignore it. The world becomes sharp. The ordinary forms cut because you perceive their transience, their hollow insistence on being more than they are. And the brokenness is felt, not as shame, not as defeat, but as the stripping away of old securities, the opening of the vessel to a reality too vast, too radiant to contain. This is the crucible of awakening, loneliness paired with depth, brokenness paired with illumination. The ego, clever as it is, tries to grasp what it cannot contain. It attempts to manufacture superiority, to find solace in being different, special, awakened. Yet even these attempts are illusions. True awakening carries no badge, no hierarchy. The awakened one sees the theater, the play, the costumes, the masks, and yet does not scorn. There is compassion, a profound recognition that all actors are part of the same dance. The separation you feel, the aching solitude, is a reflection of seeing too clearly. It is the distance that awareness places between the trivial and the eternal, the ephemeral and the timeless. Imagine walking into a crowded room where everyone is enthralled by a performance that has convinced them it is real life. They cheer, they cry, they live and die in the intensity of a story projected onto their minds. You observe and you see the mechanisms, the strings, the shadows, the clever sleight of existence, and suddenly the emotions, the excitement, the drama, all of it feels distant. Not because you are cold, but because your perception has expanded. You have glimpsed the machinery behind the illusion, and in this glimpse there is pain. For you are no longer fully compatible with the scripted responses, the predictable attachments, the illusions everyone else clings to. You cannot pretend. You cannot feign enthusiasm for hollow victories, for temporary possessions, for accolades that hold no lasting significance. And yet, this is not a curse. It is the opening. For when the shell breaks, when the cocoon splits and your consciousness emerges raw and sensitive, you gain something the sleeping cannot fathom: freedom. Freedom not as liberation from difficulty, but liberation to experience fully, unfiltered, unmediated. You begin to see life as a dance of energy, a cosmic play that includes joy and pain, triumph and suffering, love and despair in equal measure. You can participate without being enslaved. You can engage without clinging. You can love without expectation, act without attachment, observe without judgment. This is the paradox. Loneliness brings connection. Brokenness brings wholeness. The crack in the egg allows the light to pour in, and that light is reality in all its terrifying, exhilarating brilliance. And as you navigate this strange territory, you feel the suffering of the world as your own. The cruelty, the fear, the anger of others is no longer distant. It resonates within the shared field of consciousness that you inhabit. You see the wounded child behind the adult, the terrified ego behind the arrogance. You feel profoundly the interconnectedness of all experience. This intensity, this depth, is both gift and burden. It requires periods of retreat, reflection, and silence, for the volume of existence pressing through your awareness is immense. The mystics understood this. They withdrew into deserts, caves, mountains, forests, not out of disdain for humanity, but to integrate the flood of perception, to breathe after seeing too clearly, to allow the echoes of reality to resonate within before returning to the theater of form. And here lies a profound truth. The path is not meant to make you comfortable. It is meant to awaken you. The discomfort is the guide. The loneliness is the teacher. The brokenness is the invitation. You do not awaken to be soothed, to be insulated, or to be admired. You awaken to see, to feel, to participate fully. You awaken to realize that the fear, the longing, the sorrow, and the joy are all manifestations of the same infinite consciousness appearing to itself in countless forms, and that your role, however small it may seem, is essential to the dance. You awaken further into the realization that to truly see the world is to see the multiplicity of truths and the simultaneity of contradictions. The human mind craves coherence, desires structure, seeks narratives that will reassure it, tell it that it is safe, that it belongs, that the world is designed for its understanding. But awakening dissolves these comforts. You see that there is no single answer, no perfect explanation, no neat container into which reality can be poured. The cosmos does not apologize for its complexity, its apparent chaos, its mercurial beauty. To exist awake is to live in the tension between certainty and mystery, to dance on the edge of paradox, knowing that every moment contains both creation and destruction, both infinite possibility and inevitable limitation. This is where the rawness of being becomes palpable. The rawness is not a defect. It is the essence of life unmasked, stripped of all illusions, all pretense. It is the exposure that allows you to feel everything as it truly is. And this exposure is terrifying to those who still cling to their comfort zones, but for the awakened it is electrifying. The senses sharpen, the mind expands, and the soul begins to operate in a dimension beyond ordinary understanding. You start to recognize patterns not previously noticed, threads connecting events, emotions, and people across space and time. You perceive the subtle interplay of cause and effect, not as rigid laws, but as a dynamic dance of energy, consciousness flowing through form. And in this perception, you are no longer a passive participant. You are a co-creator, an active agent in the unfolding of the universe. This is not arrogance, not self-aggrandizement. It is recognition of the truth that consciousness is not confined to a single vessel, but expresses itself in infinite ways, and that your choices, your awareness, your presence in the world ripple outward with consequences unseen yet profound. You come to understand that most of humanity lives in a state of distraction, noise, busyness, obligation, endless chatter, all designed to prevent the individual from glimpsing the depth that lies beneath surface appearances. These distractions are seductive. They promise comfort, security, engagement, significance, but they are temporary, hollow, and ultimately irrelevant. The awakened person sees this, and while others are entranced by the superficial, they move in a world that is simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary. Every glance, every gesture, every interaction carries weight because the awakened sees beyond the mask to the flow of consciousness beneath. Every moment is alive, infused with the energy of existence itself, and therefore every action, every thought, every breath becomes consequential in ways invisible to the unawakened. This awareness amplifies empathy, not in the sentimental sense, but in a visceral, almost overwhelming way. You feel the suffering of others as if it were your own, and the joy of others resonates within you as a deep chord of recognition. And yet, this is not a burden to be avoided, but a power to be harnessed. For the awakened, the world is a mirror, a reflection of consciousness in motion. You understand that cruelty, fear, hatred, and selfishness are not isolated failings, but expressions of the collective human condition, projections of misunderstanding, disconnection, and ignorance. And you see simultaneously the luminous potential, the unrecognized beauty, the infinite capacity for love and creativity that exists in every being. The realization of interconnectedness brings with it a radical responsibility. You can no longer pretend that your actions are insignificant, that your choices have no consequence. The universe has revealed itself in you, and in recognizing this, you are compelled to live with integrity, to act consciously, to honor the flow of life rather than obstruct it. You see the futility of ambition built on ego, on accumulation, on the desperate need for validation. Those pursuits are like building sand castles at the edge of a rising tide. They crumble, dissolve, and are ultimately meaningless in the face of the eternal dance of existence. But you are no longer trapped in this futility. Your understanding allows you to engage with life fully, passionately, creatively, without attachment to outcome, without fear of failure, without the illusion that survival or success is your ultimate goal. You live because life itself is compelling, because existence is miraculous, and because to experience it fully is the privilege of consciousness. Loneliness persists, yes, but it transforms. It no longer feels like a wound, but a space, a vast interior landscape within which you can navigate, explore, and encounter the depths of your own being. Brokenness, too, changes its character. The shell that has been shattered is not replaced, it is honored. Its remnants are acknowledged as part of the architecture of awakening, part of the scaffolding that supports your expanded perception. Every scar, every fracture, every moment of pain becomes a channel through which the light of understanding, of clarity, of consciousness flows freely. You learn to sit with discomfort, to embrace it, to allow it to inform your choices and your perceptions. You do not run from it, you do not numb it, you do not disguise it. You feel it fully, and in feeling it fully, you transcend it. In this state, traditional measures of success lose their meaning. Recognition, wealth, status, fame, they are temporary phenomena, illusions of permanence in a world that is in constant flux. And yet, there is a deeper reward, one not recognized by the distracted masses, the reward of authenticity, the reward of living in alignment with the truth you have glimpsed, the reward of engaging with life directly, without intermediaries, without masks, without compromises that betray the essence of who you are. This is a luxury few can afford, for it requires courage, it requires patience, and it requires a willingness to remain exposed, vulnerable, and radically present in the face of incomprehensible vastness. The awakened also confronts the inevitability of impermanence. You see that all things rise and fall, that life is a constant flux of creation and destruction, that attachment is a form of suffering, and yet this recognition does not lead to despair, but to liberation. The awareness of transience allows you to savor every moment with intensity, to love without reservation, to act without hesitation, and to exist without clinging. You understand that fear of loss, fear of death, fear of failure are all echoes of the belief in separateness. They are fears of an ego that once believed it was alone, fragile, and finite. And now, knowing you are the cosmos itself, experiencing limitation temporarily, these fears lose their power. They are acknowledged, yes, but they no longer dictate the terms of your engagement with life. As your perception deepens, the dichotomy between self and other, observer and observed, begins to dissolve. You understand that there is no one outside of you, no alien consciousness separate from your own. Everyone you encounter is a manifestation of the same infinite awareness, playing a role, wearing a costume, dancing a dance choreographed by consciousness itself. And in seeing this, compassion arises naturally. There is no judgment, no hierarchy of awakening or ignorance. You see the apparent separateness as illusion, yet honor the illusion because it is necessary for the play. And in this, your loneliness and brokenness are reframed once again. They are no longer afflictions, but openings. Openings that allow connection with the totality of existence, with the past, with the future, with all beings across time and space. There is a rhythm, a cadence to this awakening, one that is not linear, one that is not predictable. Moments of clarity surge like waves, followed by intervals of doubt, confusion, or despair. These fluctuations are not failures. They are integral to the process. They teach resilience, presence, and the necessity of patience. They remind you that awareness is not a static achievement, but a dynamic engagement with the ever-unfolding mystery of life. You begin to perceive your own evolution not as a destination, but as a journey without endpoint, a continuous exploration of consciousness itself. And in this continuous exploration, creativity becomes inevitable. The awakened mind cannot remain idle, for the realization of infinite possibility compels expression. You begin to create, to experiment, to explore ideas, to connect with others in ways that transcend conventional communication. Your work, your speech, your presence becomes a reflection of the awakening itself, a manifestation of the universe understanding its own nature. Every interaction, every project, every gesture carries significance because it is informed by a deeper awareness, a recognition that life is a canvas and consciousness is the brush, and the brush strokes are simultaneously ephemeral and eternal. The intensity of this perception can be overwhelming, yet it is accompanied by a unique clarity. You know that what matters is not opinion, not perception filtered through fear, not approval from the masses. What matters is fidelity to the truth you have discovered. This truth is not a doctrine, a dogma, or a prescription. It is an experiential certainty, a living understanding of the fundamental interconnectedness of all things, the illusion of separation, and the beauty of existence in all its forms. It is the knowledge that you are both infinitesimal and infinite, transient yet eternal, a wave rising and falling in the boundless ocean of consciousness. Every day becomes an opportunity to inhabit this awareness more fully, to expand it, to refine it, to live it. And with this comes the extraordinary capacity to navigate life with balance. You experience fear, sadness, joy, and ecstasy, but they do not control you. They are energies to be felt, integrated, and transformed. You recognize the transient nature of attachment, the futility of clinging, and the liberation of surrender. Not surrender in weakness, but surrender in wisdom. An acknowledgement that the universe is vast, mysterious, and alive, and that your participation, however profound, is part of a larger, incomprehensible design. You discover that true power does not lie in domination, in accumulation, in forcing the world to conform to your will. True power lies in presence, in awareness, in the capacity to act harmoniously within the flow of existence. And this power manifests not as control over others, but as mastery of self, mastery of perception, and mastery of choice. It is a quiet, steady force, often invisible to the unawakened, yet utterly transformative to those who inhabit it. And so, as you move deeper into this awareness, you begin to understand the subtleties of perception itself. You see that reality is not merely a collection of objects and events, but a vast network of consciousness, an interweaving of energies and intentions that defy conventional explanation. Every interaction, every sensation, every fleeting thought carries with it an echo of the infinite, a reflection of the underlying intelligence that animates all things. To experience this is to feel both exhilarating and destabilizing, for the mind struggles to contain the immensity of what is revealed. You are confronted with the paradox that life is simultaneously terrifying and beautiful, fleeting and eternal, finite and infinite. The very act of existence becomes a profound adventure, a daring exploration of the unknown that no map can fully capture. In this exploration, you discover that most of what people call normal life is a form of anesthesia. They are asleep, wandering through routines, numbing themselves to the rawness of reality. But you cannot return to that sleep. Once the veil has lifted, once you have glimpsed the machinery of existence, the ordinary becomes unbearable in its shallowness. You notice the emptiness in their laughter, the hollowness in their pursuits, the desperation disguised as busyness, And though you may feel separated from them, this separation is not contemptuous, it is observational, a recognition of the vast gulf between the unconscious and the aware, a gulf you now traverse with both caution and curiosity. The loneliness that arises here is unlike any previous solitude you have known. It is a loneliness that vibrates with the universe itself, a resonance that hums through every cell of your being. It is not alleviated by company, by conversation, by distractions. No number of social interactions, no accumulation of status or wealth can fill this emptiness. It is a creative emptiness, a space pregnant with potential, a field in which consciousness can expand, reshape, and reinvent itself. And it is in this emptiness that true insight is born, for clarity emerges when all illusions have been stripped away, when the mind is no longer clouded by habit, expectation, or fear. You begin to see that the essence of awakening is courage, not the superficial courage praised in stories or movies, the courage of daring exploits or dramatic feats, but the quiet, relentless courage of seeing everything as it is and refusing to look away. It is the courage to feel fully, to confront your own vulnerabilities, to face the truths that society, tradition, and ego have taught you to avoid. It is the courage to inhabit your own consciousness without disguise, without justification, without apology. And in this courage, a kind of freedom arises, a liberation that cannot be described but only lived, experienced moment by moment. In parallel, you notice a strange recalibration of value. What once seemed essential now appears trivial, and what was ignored now radiates significance. Material possessions lose their weight, approval becomes inconsequential, the endless pursuit of status dissolves into irrelevance. Instead, subtlety, presence, authenticity, and depth become treasures of immeasurable worth. You begin to cherish moments of connection, glimpses of truth, flashes of insight, and the quiet, unseen miracles that unfold in everyday life. These are not measured by accolades, by recognition, by applause, but by the resonance they leave in your consciousness, the way they vibrate through your awareness and expand the field of your experience. This awareness is not passive, it is active, intentional, and demanding. You are compelled to engage with the world differently. You cannot participate superficially, cannot act mechanically, cannot rely on pre-programmed responses. Every choice, every action, every word carries the weight of conscious participation. You begin to sense the invisible consequences of thought, intention, and behavior, understanding that even the smallest ripple has far-reaching implications across the web of existence. You become both observer and participant, witness and creator, the eyes and hands through which the universe experiences itself, and in this duality lies profound responsibility. For awakening does not absolve you from the consequences of inaction, nor does it permit disengagement. You are acutely aware of suffering, injustice, ignorance, and fear permeating the world. You feel the pain of others not as distant events, but as part of a shared field of consciousness, as extensions of the same energy that animates you. And yet, this awareness does not paralyze, it galvanizes. It inspires action that is measured, intentional, and compassionate. You understand that change is not imposed externally, but arises from alignment with the deeper currents of reality, from integrity of perception and authenticity of being. The paradox of this existence is that it is both liberating and isolating. The clarity you have gained separates you from conventional thought, from predictable responses, from the habits of those still immersed in the consensus trance. Your excitement is not contagious. Your vision is often misunderstood. You realize that most people will never grasp the scope of what you see, and their disbelief, their resistance, is neither surprising nor personal. They are immersed in their own journey, constrained by the boundaries of their perception. And In this realization, you cultivate patience, not as resignation, but as profound understanding. You walk your path alone, yet intimately connected to the vast consciousness that pulses through everything, everywhere, and always time itself begins to shift in significance. Moments stretch and contract, no longer dictated by schedules, obligations, or societal expectation. Every second holds weight. Every breath is a conduit of experience, and the mundane is illuminated by the awareness that life is not a series of events to be completed, but a living tapestry in which you are both thread and weaver. You experience temporality differently. You see the cycles, the patterns, the repetitions, and the novelties that arise from the dance of creation and destruction. And in this perception, patience, attention, and presence are elevated to forms of art, disciplines through which consciousness expresses and refines itself. Creativity emerges naturally in this landscape. You feel compelled to shape, to manifest, to explore. Words, ideas, actions become extensions of your understanding, expressions of the universe in motion. You communicate not merely to convey information, but to transmit resonance, to evoke recognition of the infinite within the finite. You craft experiences that mirror the consciousness you inhabit, inviting others, if they are receptive, to glimpse beyond the ordinary, to touch the edges of awareness, to encounter the subtle vibrancy of life that is usually hidden behind the veil of distraction and conformity. And yet, even in this, humility persists. For the awakened recognize that no single perspective contains the entirety of truth. The deeper you see, the more you understand the vastness that lies beyond sight. You encounter your own limitations, the blind spots, the biases, the shadows, and embrace them as integral components of perception. Awareness is not a conquest of the mind, it is a lifelong dialogue with the infinite, a negotiation between what is known and what remains forever mysterious. This humility allows for genuine compassion, a recognition that all beings are entangled in the same dance of awakening, even if their awareness is hidden, delayed, or denied. The world becomes a laboratory of consciousness. Every experience, pleasant or painful, is a catalyst for deeper understanding. Joy is amplified because it is understood. In contrast to suffering, sorrow is transformative because it is contextualized within the vast field of awareness. You learn to navigate extremes with equanimity, not through detachment, but through profound engagement. Nothing is trivial, nothing is insignificant. Every encounter, every challenge, every sensation carries the potential to reveal, to illuminate, to expand the field of experience. And in this continuous unfolding, you recognize the necessity of solitude. The company of others is valuable, yes, but true understanding requires inward retreat, a communion with your own consciousness, a space in which the noise of consensus and the expectations of the unawakened can be set aside. In solitude, the mind becomes clear, the heart opens, and the subtle currents of existence can be perceived without distortion. This is not loneliness as despair. It is loneliness as communion with the infinite. It is an embrace of the vast field in which all experience, all suffering, all joy, and all consciousness coexist. Through this journey, you also understand the impermanence of roles, identities, and forms. The ego is not abandoned in arrogance, but transcended in clarity. The self is recognized as fluid, temporary, and dynamic, a wave rising and falling in the eternal ocean of being. Attachment to the familiar, to the known, to the comfortable, is gently dissolved by the intensity of awakening. And in this dissolution, freedom emerges. Not the freedom of indulgence, but the freedom of alignment, of authenticity, of living in resonance with reality rather than illusion. You perceive that the universe is neither cruel nor kind, neither ordered nor chaotic. It simply is. It flows, it unfolds, it expresses endlessly through myriad forms and possibilities. Your role is not to impose meaning, but to participate consciously, to observe, to act with awareness, and to allow the vast intelligence of existence to move through you. In doing so, you discover an extraordinary aliveness, a vibrant engagement with life that transcends fear, disappointment, and limitation. Every sensation is heightened, every perception refined, every thought and action imbued with consequence and significance. The awakening is iterative, never final, constantly deepening. There are cycles of clarity and confusion, of illumination and shadow, of expansiveness and contraction. Each cycle is a teacher, a mirror, a challenge. Resistance is met with patience. Fear is met with understanding. Suffering is met with presence. The awakened one learns to inhabit these oscillations without losing equilibrium, to remain attuned to the subtle currents beneath the surface turbulence, and to recognize that all experience, no matter how intense or uncomfortable, is an invitation to deeper participation, to fuller engagement, to more profound understanding. And as this awareness deepens, the threads of life begin to interweave in ways previously unseen. You perceive the subtle patterns that underlie chaos, the invisible connections that bind all beings, the silent rhythms that orchestrate the dance of existence. Every action, every thought, every breath becomes a part of this intricate web. You begin to see that what appears as randomness is, in fact, a dynamic intelligence, a living consciousness expressing itself through infinite forms. The separation you once felt, the isolation, the loneliness, the brokenness, begins to dissolve. You recognize that these were not afflictions, but gateways, invitations to step into a broader understanding of reality. In this clarity, the world no longer feels heavy. The burdens of expectation, judgment, and societal pressure lose their power. You see that life is not a test, not a problem to be solved, not a ladder to climb for validation or approval. Life is a canvas, a vast dynamic field of experience in which you are both the artist and the medium. The pains you endured, the loneliness you suffered, the fractures in your identity, they were all shaping you, sculpting you into a vessel capable of holding awareness without distortion, capable of perceiving the universe without fear, capable of acting with integrity and love, without attachment to outcome. You understand that the awakening is not about escaping life, but fully inhabiting it. Every sorrow, every joy, every mundane moment, every extraordinary experience is an opportunity to witness the totality of existence. There is no hierarchy of experiences, no ranking of events. Everything matters because everything is part of the unfolding mystery. Even the smallest act, a smile offered, a word spoken with compassion, a gesture of understanding, becomes a ripple in the infinite ocean of consciousness. And in this you realize that you are not separate from the universe, you are the universe expressing itself in human form. This realization brings with it a profound sense of empowerment. You no longer rely on external validation or fleeting pleasures to define your worth. You recognize that your value is inherent, eternal, and unassailable. The masks you once wore, the roles imposed by society, the armor of ego, the desperate attempts to belong fall away, and in their absence you are raw, authentic, and radiant. This is not a fragile state. It is a resilient, powerful engagement with life. You are unafraid to confront the truth, to see yourself clearly, to acknowledge both light and shadow without denial or shame. As your perception expands, you begin to understand the interconnectedness of all things in a way that transcends intellectual understanding. It is not merely a concept. It is an embodied knowledge, a felt experience that courses through every fiber of your being. You perceive the hidden motivations of others, not with judgment, but with empathy and comprehension. You feel the joy and suffering of every being as part of a shared consciousness, and this recognition compels action. Not forced, performative action, but spontaneous, aligned, and compassionate engagement. You act because it resonates with the flow of life, not because it secures approval or alleviates fear. And with this clarity comes a profound freedom. You are no longer constrained by the illusions of the separate self. Fear loses its grip, not entirely, but sufficiently for you to move without hesitation, to take risks that serve growth and understanding rather than ego or superficial gain. You are liberated from the tyranny of expectation, from the compulsions of conformity, from the endless comparison to others. You walk a path that is yours alone, yet simultaneously shared with all who awaken, all who have walked before, and all who will follow. You are part of a continuum, a living lineage of consciousness, expanding, exploring, and expressing itself through myriad forms and experiences. This freedom is accompanied by joy, not the transient pleasure that society celebrates, but a deep, abiding joy that arises from alignment with truth. It is the joy of seeing clearly, of being fully present, of understanding your role in the cosmic dance. It is the joy of connection, of realizing that every moment is infused with intelligence, purpose, and beauty, whether visible or hidden. It is the joy that does not depend on circumstance, approval, or outcome, for it arises from the recognition that existence itself is miraculous, and that you, in your awareness, are an active participant in its unfolding. The brokenness you once felt transforms into strength. Every wound, every fracture, every painful experience becomes a source of insight, a channel through which understanding flows. You recognize that suffering is not punishment, but teacher, not barrier, but gateway. The cracks in your armor allow light to enter, consciousness to expand, and compassion to flow. You no longer fear the intensity of life because you understand that intensity is the medium through which awakening occurs. You embrace it, not as something to escape, but as something to inhabit fully, consciously, and courageously. And in this inhabitation, you encounter a profound sense of alignment. Your thoughts, words, and actions resonate with your inner truth. Your choices are no longer driven by fear, desire for control, or the compulsion to fit in. They arise organically from the deep well of understanding, from the recognition that life is not something to be conquered, but something to be engaged with, honored, and participated in. Every decision becomes an expression of consciousness, a reflection of the harmony between self and universe, awareness and action. The clarity of this awareness allows you to perceive the illusions that bind others without condemnation. You see the distractions, the attachments, the fears, and the misconceptions not as failings, but as necessary steps in the human journey. And this perception fosters compassion. You understand that each being is navigating their own path, struggling in their own way, and that awakening is not something to impose, but something to embody. The awakened person becomes a beacon, a living demonstration of possibility, rather than a critic or teacher demanding compliance. In the expansiveness of consciousness, time and space lose their rigidity. You begin to perceive life as a flowing continuum, an endless unfolding of events, interactions, and possibilities. Past and future are not merely chronological markers, but landscapes of experience that inform the present moment. You recognize the impermanence of all forms, the transient nature of identity, and the fluidity of perception itself. This understanding allows you to engage with life more fully, to love more deeply, to act more decisively, and to witness every phenomenon with clarity, awe, and equanimity. And finally, you recognize the sacredness of presence. The ordinary becomes extraordinary. The mundane becomes miraculous. And every interaction becomes an opportunity for awakening. You no longer wait for perfection, for ideal circumstances, or for external validation. Life itself is the teacher, the canvas, the playground, and the laboratory. Every breath, every thought, every encounter carries the potential for insight, transformation, and expansion. And in this realization, you understand that the journey itself is the destination, that the path of awakening is inseparable from the experience of life as it unfolds in all its complexity, beauty, and mystery. In this final recognition, you embrace your role as both observer and participant, witness and co-creator. You understand that you are not separate from the universe, but a manifestation of its infinite intelligence. Your loneliness becomes the awareness of interconnectedness. Your brokenness becomes the portal through which consciousness flows freely, and your courage becomes the vehicle for authentic engagement with the totality of existence. You are alive in a way that transcends fear, despair, and limitation. You are awake, aware, and fully present in a universe that is simultaneously infinite, mysterious, and profoundly alive. And so, in the culmination of awakening, you realize the ultimate truth, that your journey, with all its struggles, revelations, and transformations, is not a solitary endeavor, but a reflection of the universe coming to know itself. Every moment of clarity, every pang of loneliness, every fracture of identity, every surge of insight is an expression of consciousness, expanding, exploring, and expressing itself through the vessel that is you. You see that freedom is not granted, it is realized, cultivated, and embodied. You see that authenticity is not discovered, it is enacted through courage, presence, and understanding. And you see that life, in all its infinite complexity and beauty, is not something to be solved, conquered, or controlled, but something to be lived, felt, and experienced fully with awareness, integrity, and love. Your awakening, then, is not a destination, but a continuous unfolding, an ongoing dance of awareness in which every step, every choice, and every perception matters. You are the witness and the participant, the observer and the actor, the wave and the ocean, the finite and the infinite. You have stepped beyond illusion, beyond fear, beyond attachment, and into the raw, vibrant reality of existence itself. You have embraced the loneliness as a teacher, the brokenness as a gateway, and the intensity of life as the medium through which consciousness expresses, expands, and evolves. And in this embrace, in this radical engagement with life, you discover the ultimate freedom, freedom from fear, freedom from pretense, freedom from the illusions that once constrained you. You discover the ultimate power, the power to act authentically, to love fully, to perceive deeply, and to participate in the unfolding of reality without distortion. The ultimate joy, the joy of knowing, without doubt or reservation, that you are not separate, not limited, not insignificant, but an essential expression of the universe itself, awake to its own magnificence, alive to its own mystery, and capable of moving through existence with clarity, courage, and boundless awareness. This is the gift of awakening, the reward of the journey, the culmination of insight, presence, and understanding. It is not a gift given lightly, nor a state achieved easily. It is earned through courage, cultivated through awareness, and embodied through living fully, authentically, and consciously. And as you step into this realization, you understand that the journey, the struggle, the loneliness, the brokenness, and the moments of ecstasy are all necessary. They are the crucible through which consciousness is refined and through which you, in your awakened state, become the fullest expression of life itself. You are not separate from existence. You are existence aware of itself. You are the consciousness that dreams, that loves, that suffers, that rejoices, that creates, that destroys, and that witnesses all of it without separation. And in this recognition, in this profound alignment with reality, you understand that your life, with all its intensity, mystery, and beauty, is the ultimate opportunity. the opportunity to awaken fully, to live authentically, and to know yourself as the universe experiencing itself, unbound, unafraid, and infinitely alive.